Hey guys, I didn't know you were there. I was just solving this Rubik's Cube. So today we have on Mychael Schnell on the podcast. She's Congressional Reporter for The Hill. She is extremely good at solving Rubik's Cubes. No, I did not do this on my own. I'm too much of an idiot to figure out how to do something like this. But she is extremely smart, and it's just algorithms and all that stuff. But she solves it during the interview today, probably in like a minute. It was wild to watch. So for those just listening, I'm sorry. You're going to miss something really fascinating, but make sure to follow us on social media so you see it. Coming up, we have a Meet the New Members event that The Hill is doing that Connect is a sponsor of. So we will make sure to link in the bio to our registration link there. But this is a great episode. We talk a little bit about 2025 and expectations for Congress. Check it out. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Capitol Spotlight. Today, we are here with Congressional Reporter Mychael Schnell of The Hill. Welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So tell us a little bit, how long have you been at The Hill? Let's just start there.
About 3.5 years now.
Okay, good stuff.
Yeah.
And you're a GW grad?
That's right. Went to GW, graduated from there.
All right, good stuff. So how did you get involved in politics to start?
So I always knew I wanted to do journalism. If you asked me why, I couldn't really tell you why. I always was the one asking a lot of questions in class and things like that. But at first I thought I wanted to do sports journalism.
Okay.
So did the whole thing in high school, editor of the sports section for the
Sure.
newspaper, play-by-play commentary for the varsity sports games, morning announcements. And it was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it. But it was during that time I sort of realized that sports reporting felt a little bit mundane. I felt like I was using the same catchphrases but different names every week.
Sure.
And it's a cliche, but this was around the time of the 2016 election. Finally started paying attention more on the TV. My parents had been begging me for years, and I finally listened to them. Started paying attention a little bit more, and I realized that, politics is interesting. In a way, it's like a sport. You have the teams, Democrats, Republicans. You've got the primaries, which is the playoffs, and the Super Bowl, which is your general election.
Sure.
It's cliche, but I caught the political bug and I decided this is the type of journalism I want to pursue. And that's what brought me to GW and then now at The Hill.
Cool. Are there ever days when the House is voting at like 12 at night and you're like, man, I wish I was just covering sports right now?
There have been plenty of those times. The speaker's race, debt limit. It is an all day, all night, all weekend type of job, but the exhilaration that you get with it, the adrenaline rush, and the excitement of not exactly knowing how a story is going to end, but being able to follow it from point A to B to C. It's always exciting. It's something new every day.
That's great. So tell us a little bit about your background. Where are you from? You grew up in New York, so tell us about that.
Yeah, born and raised in New York on Long Island. Grew up there. Big New York sports fan. I am that type of New Yorker who thinks that New York is the center of the universe and that we have the best everything.
Is there any New Yorker that doesn't think that?
No, you're right. I'm one of the many. I'm one of the norm.
Yes.
And so grew up there, big family person, New York. And then, as I mentioned, I knew I wanted to do political journalism. So that's what brought me to DC for GW. And then I didn't know, I didn't see any instance where I could leave DC after spending 4 years here in school. And so I decided to, stick around, pursue different journalism opportunities here, and now I'm reporting on Capitol Hill for The Hill, which is just so much fun.
Yeah, I bet. You guys got a new office recently
That's
too,
right.
which I just got to check it out.
It's
I'm
very
like,
exciting.
Man, I gotta go somehow work for The Hill.
We've got
just
a nice
to hang
coffee
out.
machine. It's exciting.
Yeah, there you go. That's all that matters. We are very excited at Connect because we're about to get a nice coffee
Love
machine. So it means a lot.
Exactly.
But okay, let's take a step back. So you're a Giants fan. Who else are your New York teams?
Giants, Mets, Yankees also. I know it's controversial. I've always been a Yankees fan. Just got into the Mets recently.
Okay.
My brother is a big Mets fan. It was fun to watch the Mets in the playoffs this year.
Yeah.
And then the Knicks also. Basketball season right now.
All right. Well, so you've got some hope.
There's some
obviously.
hope. It's a lot of tough, but there's some hope.
Francisco Lindor is awesome. So there's
Love Lindor.
at least there's that.
Love Lindor.
So, all right, we got to talk about New York pizza
That's
too.
right.
What are your spots in New York?
See, my spots are on Long Island, so
Okay.
I love them, like the neighborhood place Friendlier. Another spot called The Pizza Place.
Gotcha. Classic.
Pretty good name. But just a classic New York slice. You can't go wrong. I was in Chicago for, I was in the RNC in Milwaukee, covering the RNC, and so then I did some travel in and out through Chicago. And I sat down and I had a deep dish one day and I was like, this isn't it.
Where'd you go?
I went to Lou Malnati's, which was recommended by some of my Chicago friends. But I'm sitting there, I fork and knife, and then you gotta like really chew it through. Like, I like my New York slice. You fold it, you eat it like that,
sure.
you call it a day.
Would you agree with Dave Portnoy's assessment of what a New York slice is? Like, very crispy.
It's gotta be crispy, thin, crispy, not a lot of oil.
Okay.
Absolutely, yeah.
For sure. Do you have any spots in the city that you like?
Honestly, sometimes the best thing in the city is just the $1 slice spot.
For sure.
That's open all the time, anytime. Just anything's good like that.
Nice, for sure. We had a friend growing up, from my family friend, who is from Italy originally, from Naples, but came to Pittsburgh to open a Neapolitan pizza shop. And then he's like, I want to make it big and go to Bleecker Street, open a restaurant there, and got super famous. He's now in like diners, drive-ins, and dives.
I gotta still try
that.
John's. Everyone says John's on Bleecker is the best. I still gotta hit that.
I gotta thank my old roommate. Whenever we'd go to New York, we'd like be at a party, and all of a sudden he would just order John's at Bleecker, and it shows up. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so good.
It's the most popular guy at the party.
Yeah, for sure. That's definitely a good point. So we love pizza here. We need to do like more pizza content, honestly. But
It's got to be a crowd pleaser.
So whenever you were at GW, you started to get more interested in politics. How did that set you up to get such a good gig in political reporting?
So one of the best parts about going to school at GW was that you're in the heart of Washington. And I was looking for internships every semester. So starting my fall semester sophomore year, I had an internship every single semester I was at GW, which was a great opportunity because at other schools, sometimes the only opportunity you have at big networks or in big papers or over the summer when you're at home or you're in a big metro city and you can spend the summer there. But being in DC, these outlets offered internships during the school year, which was just fantastic. So I would stack my classes 2 days a week, intern the other 3 days a week, crisscross back and forth. And I really think that, those connections that I made, that experience that I picked up, and just sort of understanding and figuring out what I liked about the industry and what I didn't like in the sense of what I wanted to do post-grad, it helped me shape a path early on and sort of helped me set up different connections I had made and grow my network so that by the time I came around to graduation, I had that foundation to then go ahead and know what I wanted to do, and B, know the best folks to talk to pursue that.
Did you ever do a Hill internship?
I didn't,
Man,
but
missing out.
I know I didn't intern for a member on the Hill, though. There were a couple days during my internships that I went up to Capitol Hill to support the Capitol Hill teams. There was one internship. It was in the fall of 2019. I went up to the Capitol and helped cover the first impeachment proceedings about now President-elect Trump.
For sure.
Which sort of started my bug of wanting to cover Congress full time. Which is a thrill a minute.
Yeah, I was a deputy press secretary at the time, and it was just like, what a time to be alive. If you come into like press and you think about those type of moments and you like romanticize it in your head of what you see on TV and all that, to be a part of something that was that big was just wild.
A lot of sitting and standing on the cold marble floors in the hallway.
Oh, for sure.
A lot of hours at stakeouts, a lot of chasing members, sometimes getting answers, sometimes not. But it was, the thing I've always come back to is that it's just, what I do is so much fun, right? Sometimes it doesn't feel like a job. It feels like a hobby.
For sure.
It's something new every day. I'm always learning something. So like I said, it's a thrill a minute.
Yeah, that adrenaline rush that you mentioned was definitely the
it's very real.
Here.
Yes.
Absolutely. Those are some of the latest nights I've ever had working. So very glad they're over, but we'll never forget those moments. So do you have any other specific moments in your congressional reporting career that really stick out? Like taking in specific moments like, wow, this is insane that I'm part of this.
I covered a couple things in the past 2 years of the 118th Congress. I was in the Capitol and I covered the speaker's race for Kevin McCarthy, the one that historically went for 15 rounds, 4 days, 15 rounds. That was one of the stories where, I was covering it every day, but I genuinely didn't know how it was going to end. And then so I subsequently followed the to cover the toppling of Kevin McCarthy with the first ever motion to vacate, that being successful, and then the 3 weeks of paralysis in the House where there was no leader, no legislative business. We didn't know what was going to happen, who could muster enough support to win the gavel in that conference. Of course, it ended up being Mike Johnson, and it's been fascinating to watch his, now year-plus tenure in the top job. And then the debt limit negotiations were also fascinating to cover. Another story where we didn't know how it was going to end, but obviously we're on the brink of the first ever economic default, watching McCarthy and his deputy shuffle back and forth from the White House, having negotiations with administration officials, and then finally seeing that deal come together at the end, and that sort of being the beginning of the end for Kevin McCarthy.
Yeah.
Those are probably 3 highlights of stories on Capitol Hill.
What a time to be a fly on the wall.
Yes.
I feel like obviously everything moves faster in our day and age, but at least from politics, I feel like there's so much more going on than there ever was before.
There are several news cycles in a single day.
Yeah, for sure.
And what you start covering in the morning, a lot of the times is not what you're covering by the evening. And that story you started in the morning, a lot of the times has completely changed a few times when you hit the evening hours.
For sure. That was always so frustrating, like writing press releases or keeping tweets up to date. Is as soon as something's relevant or as soon as you're done writing something, it's no longer relevant.
We feel the same way on the press side in terms of just consistently updating articles and making sure we have the latest on the top of the website.
So going off topic a little bit, but we have a lot of staffers that listen to the show, comm staffers. How can comm staffers build good relationships with congressional reporters?
Love coffee meetings. I think it's a great way to meet because, a lot of the time, we're talking constantly over email or over text, but it's nice to just meet in person,
For sure.
get to know somebody as a person and not just as a comm staffer.
Yeah.
What's your favorite sports team? What's your favorite type of food? Where do you live? Where do you hang out? I've always loved that, sort of creating the connection. And then it's always nice because you never want it to feel like a relationship is transactional in the sense that you give me information and then I give you, I cover something and vice versa. You want to sort of be able to have that human interaction, that human relationship.
Yeah.
So I've always enjoyed when folks have reached out to me, asked to grab coffee, grab lunch. I think it's a great way to meet somebody. And then you never know, in the future, you may need help from that person if they're a member, they're a lawmaker, their boss is in the news. You have a connection right there that you can easily reach out to. And it's not a cold connection.
Yeah.
And it doesn't feel transactional because you have that personal relationship with them.
Absolutely. So are you someone who would rather take those meetings out of session or in session?
Definitely out of session.
Okay.
It's more helpful. In session, it's just things are too haphazard. It's too difficult to plan.
For sure.
There have been a lot of times I've had coffee meetings on an in-session day in the Capitol, and it's had to move because something new happened. Someone said something or someone did something, and I've had to go cover it. So definitely planning a schedule is way more manageable out of session.
For sure.
As I'm sure you could relate to.
Oh, yeah. So we went too far into politics. I got to take a step back for a minute. You have an incredible skill of being able to solve Rubik's Cubes from 3x3s to 9x9s.
That's right.
How did you get involved in that?
So there was a family dinner at my house years ago. I can't tell you how many years ago, I don't remember. And for years I had this Yankees Rubik's Cube, and I couldn't solve it for the life of me. It sat in the house just unsolved for years. And so one night my family was over and my aunt picked up the Rubik's Cube and she said, "This is easy, I could do this." I said, "Oh yeah, Aunt Carrie, I'll tell you what, you do it, I'll buy you an iced coffee tomorrow. If you can't do it, you buy me an iced coffee." She goes, "Easy." She's futzing with it for 5 minutes, nothing. 10 minutes, 15 minutes. "How's it going over there?" "Oh, I'll be able to do it." So at the end of the night, she couldn't figure out how to solve the Rubik's Cube, which I was not surprised about. And I said, "You owe me an iced coffee." But to really prove a point that night, and I sound like a complete nerd saying this, I stayed up and I watched videos teaching me how to solve a Rubik's Cube. I was really determined to get it. So embarrassed to be saying this. And I finally figured it out. It's just a series of different algorithms that you do. And I kept,
Totally easy, normal stuff.
Once you get the hang of it, I'm telling you, it's manageable. So I kept doing it, practicing, and then I went over to my aunt's house the next day, and I was like, "Hey, check it out." She's like, "How'd you do that? Did you pop the cubes out?" I was like, "No, I learned how to do it." And then it turns out that once you have the main algorithms down and the movements, it's basically the same with a few tweaks for all the different sizes. So that is probably one of the nerdiest things about me, but I gotta tell you, they're a lot of fun and it could be relaxing.
It's pretty cool. A 9x9 just seems wild though.
That one's just, it takes hours and it's like hard to hold in your hand, and and the rows are small, so it's hard to move, but yeah, it's definitely a hobby.
How long would it take you to solve a 3x3?
I could do it in probably a minute and a half.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we have a minute and a half right
Oh,
now.
Oh God, I'm on the spot.
Do you want to try it out?
All right. Let's see what we got. See, now I got to really make sure I don't mess this up.
The pressure's on.
I'm feeling it.
Are you able to talk through what you're thinking about while you do it, or is that too much?
You do it in layers. So you can see I've got the first X right there. And so you basically, the way you solve it is with layers. So I'm going to solve the whole white layer right now. Oh, this is a nice cube, a speed cube. So you just go through, and I'm essentially placing in the corners right now. You can see it there. And so now I've got the whole white side, the whole...
Jeez, that was quick.
So now I'm going to go do the middle. So this one, I can't explain to you how this works. The video did not get through that. And so I'm going to just... Almost there. That, and then now the second layer is all done. So now you flip it over and you got to do this layer. Okay, so you got to line up the colors. All right, and then you go like that. Now you got to line up the corners. So this is the last step. And just like that.
That's awesome. Good for
It's
you.
a fun party trick.
Yeah,
it's
that's
a fun
great
party trick.
Jeez. Okay. I don't even know where to go from there.
It's a fun hobby. I have no explanation for it. I'm a nerd.
I really wanted to do that. Like, we ordered one just to make sure that this could happen.
No, I swear, I would not lie about that.
And this was not planned ahead of time.
Nope.
We didn't say anything.
Nope.
Wow. Good for you.
Thank you.
That was very cool. I mean, that was super quick.
Yeah.
I didn't know if it'd be like...
No.
You know?
I got it down pat.
I'm glad I put you on the spot.
I'm glad you did.
So... We usually don't do this on the podcast, but we're going to talk a little politics, more speculation. But Connect is sponsoring a Hill event that is coming up about Meet the New Members.
That's right. So
in early December, so shortly after this comes out, we will be doing an event, or you guys will be doing an event, and we'll be part of it.
Very excited for
that. With that theme going, I wanted to just hear your thoughts on what do you think are some cool opportunities for bipartisanship in 2025?
Big question, loaded question. This may be something that folks may not agree with or believe, but I think there's a possibility, potentially foreign aid. And I know that has been something that has been iffy on the Republican side, with a growing number of Republicans who believe in the America First philosophy of foreign policy. But there are still a lot of folks in the Republican conference, both in the House and in the Senate, who believe in the Reagan philosophy and idealism of foreign policy, of having a strong presence on the foreign policy stage. Now, of course, a wild card here is President-elect Trump, because he has a history, and Vice President-elect J.D. Vance. They both have histories in terms of their posture towards foreign aid, and I'm talking about particularly Ukraine, as the war with Ukraine and Russia. I believe it's approaching its third year now.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Third or fourth year now. Third year now. So I think that's an area that there could be bipartisanship. And of course, if anything's going to get done this Congress, other than, and not to get too in the weeds, other than tax reform with reconciliation, there's going to have to be some bipartisanship. And we did see that President-elect Trump was on the phone with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, so they have had contact. So I think there's a possibility we can see something there, in addition to aid for Israel, which, Israel has support from both parties. It's a foundation. There are some rumblings in the Democratic Party about folks who are concerned with aid going to Israel, but I'd say by and large, there's majorities of both parties that are supportive of Israel. So I think that foreign aid is a place where if there's going to be anything done, and I think there's a big chance that there's going to have to be something done, just because of the state of those two wars in the Middle East and in Europe, that they will have to be bipartisan, because even though Republicans have this trifecta here in Washington, there's still that 60 vote threshold in the Senate.
Yeah, for sure.
And there are still a number of Republicans in the Senate conference that are not the biggest fans of Trump. Mavericks, people like Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, who are not going to be too shy to go against the president.
I think there'll be a good equalizer for him.
Yeah. And I mean, look, still that wouldn't be enough because Republicans they're going to have 53 seats, but there are some others too. There's people like Bill Cassidy who voted to impeach Trump. There's somebody like Tom Tillis who's been clear that he's not the president-elect's biggest fan. Yeah. So I think that's one area of potential bipartisanship. There's also maybe some conversation about, looking at AI and what that looks like. It's been a big priority in the Senate, and we'll see what happens there in the House. And then disaster relief is usually an area of bipartisanship. We're likely going to see that right now in the funding fight with Hurricanes Helene and Milton. Hopefully there's not a need for more disaster relief.
Yeah, for sure.
But that is always typically an area of bipartisanship as well.
Yeah, on the AI thing, it's something that we've noticed. We do polling of congressional staff daily, and staffers on both sides, there's no clear partisan behavior on how they feel about AI. Both sides are kind of split 50-50 of I have a positive sentiment or a negative sentiment towards it. So it's nothing that is really a party line thing.
I think it's a lot of education also, right? This is such a new emerging piece of technology, not just in Washington, but all over. So I think that a lot of lawmakers and staffers are just trying to wrap their head around, well, what does this actually look like practically? Yeah. And then what role do we need to play in making sure that it's done properly?
For sure. And something we also saw is whether or not they like or dislike AI, most staffers do agree that there needs to be some sort of regulation around it. And I know a little bit ago, Google's one of their executives came out and said the industry should be in charge of regulating it, and staffers vehemently disagreed on that one. So they do believe the federal government has a role in regulating this industry, and so that'll be interesting to see.
Absolutely.
Quick side note: we all know the conversations around AI, and a lot of Hill staffers, at least in our polling, show that they don't use AI on a consistent basis as part of their job. Do you use it at all?
I don't personally. No. I like to look, if I'm looking for an answer to a question, I like to look it up, read articles. Oftentimes, then you'll learn other pieces of information. And then I'm a writer. So what I do for a living is write. So I wouldn't want to give that task to anybody else.
For sure. Yeah, we know the writers in the room. Definitely feel a strong way about AI, and we can respect that one for sure. So what other opportunities do you see there being next year for some bipartisanship?
Honestly, it's a tough question because things have become just so polarized and so partisan in D.C. I guess one thing that's going to have to come up is we're going to have to deal with the debt limit again this year. Expected that the U.S. will hit its debt limit soon, and then those extraordinary measures will kick in, and then once again, there's going to have to be a deal. And this is one of those things that has to be done, or else there's an economic default. Yeah. Which nobody's going to want. It would be the first ever economic default. And it's something that's going to have to be bipartisan, again, because of that 60 vote threshold in the Senate. So I'm curious to see how that will shake out. What do those negotiations look like? Who are the power players in those talks? Are there more spending caps? Are there other issues? What's sort of the horse trading that's going to go on between Democrats and Republicans to get a large enough coalition to get that over the finish line? For
sure. Another one that I found super interesting in polling we did recently was we asked staffers if they just think climate change is real.
Sure.
And almost all Democratic staffers said yes, but Republican staffers, for the most part, I think it was 90% or something, said yes, they believe in it.
That's interesting.
Either it's a big deal or it's kind of a big deal, which it doesn't surprise me too much. I think a lot of times younger staffers are more likely to hold that opinion compared to their bosses who may be a little bit more traditional in their viewpoints on that from the conservative side of things. Do you think there could ever be a possibility for some type of coming together on that?
It's always a possibility. I'm a bit skeptical just because of sort of the comments that we have heard from Republicans in recent history. But it's always a possibility, though. Again, the skepticism is absolutely there.
Do you think if there was a place to start, it's pure speculation, but is there anything in particular that you think Republicans and Democrats could come together on?
I'd have to think about that one. will admit I'm not a climate expert. We've got fantastic energy and environment reporters at the Hill who I love to team up with because they are the subject area experts. So I'd have to come back to you on that. But again, I mean, it's definitely an issue that I think Democrats will be pushing and want to talk about. It's just a question of will you get enough Republicans to get on board with those conversations?
For sure. I wonder if having Elon with such a big presence in the Trump administration, if that will somehow open the door for more support towards EV kind of stuff, or I think maybe opportunities with nuclear could be interesting too. So we'll just see where it goes.
All on the table.
Another one that we've seen a lot of success, or not success, but support with Republican and Democrat staff is food regulation.
Okay.
And obviously it's very trendy right now to see like what a Fruit Loops looks like in the European Union versus in America. And so with say RFK gets confirmed and heads HHS, do you think that there will be opportunities in that world? I think some people would have to get beyond how people feel about RFK's vaccine status and so on. But when it comes down to food regulation, any thoughts there?
Again, it's always a possibility, and I think that it's especially fascinating to think about that with RFK being the nominee for HHS. I think that's something that we're going to run into over the next 2 years, and I say 2, of course, because the midterms are in 2026, and then we'll see what Congress looks like after that, is time. And, like, these things that we're talking about take up so much political capital and political time that it's going to be, you're going to have to cut out a chunk of time to put towards these endeavors. And the question is, A, is it a high enough priority for the president-elect and leaders in Congress? And B, do you have that time to dedicate to those matters aside from doing government funding fights and aside from doing the debt limit and aside from doing the NDAA, some of these must-pass things that have to be done? It doesn't happen too often. This Congress, we saw I'm thinking about this Congress, we didn't see too many bipartisan. Well, this Congress, we saw the Inflation Reduction Act, and we saw the gun control bill, and we saw the infrastructure bill. But that's over the past 2 Congresses. That's three main things, big undertaking. So these things take a lot of time.
Yeah, for sure.
And sometimes there's not too much time for those things on Capitol Hill.
Do you expect to see Trump build some coalitions on some of those bigger things to hopefully just get stuff through easier?
If he wants to, he'll have to, right? I think it's just going to depend on what's his priority. I mean, Republicans right now are saying they want to come out the gate with those tax cuts. Parts of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that Trump enacted in 2017, some parts of that are going to expire at the end of this year. So Republicans are going to want to come out the gate and try to use budget reconciliation to extend some of those provisions. That could take a long time. And, we talk about budget reconciliation, it'll be a piece of cake because Republicans have a trifecta, but Republicans are on track to have an extremely slim majority in the House. One that is getting even slimmer as the president-elect continues to take nominees from the House for his cabinet. And in the Senate, we were talking about before, there are still some Republicans in there who aren't so keen with the president-elect, and if they don't love what he's putting forward, they may not support it. So even though Republicans have the trifecta, there are still going to be a number of landmines and hurdles to clear as they try to tick off some of these key priorities from their to-do list.
For sure. I think as a company that is nonpartisan and loves bipartisanship, I hope that it leads to opportunities to coalition build because it is such a slim majority in the House right now that let's force your hand in a bipartisan way.
There are opportunities. I mean, it's a slim majority in the House, and it's also the filibuster in the Senate. Again, Republicans do have this trifecta, but it has to muster the through the parliamentarian to use reconciliation, and even there, it's not a done deal. So there are these opportunities, I think, for bipartisanship, absolutely, because of just the nature of the makeup of Congress.
For sure. So, side note, but do you have any topics in particular that you really like to nerd out on?
I love government funding fights. I do. I find those to be a lot of fun, even though sometimes they're repetitive. I've always loved the numbers involved in it and sort of what the different stakeholders are pushing for and pulling for. And also the political fights are always a lot of fun. So I've been keeping an eye on right now Johnson's path to winning the gavel in January. Looks like he's okay right now. He was unanimously nominated last week. to be the Republican nominee for Speaker, but there's a lot of time between now and January 3rd, including December 20th, which is the government funding deadline. A lot of folks are watching to see how he handles that deadline, particularly hardline conservative Republicans, to see if they're pleased with how he handles that deadline, they will likely support him in January. If they're not, we could see something similar to what happened in 2023 with the election of Kevin McCarthy.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think that, at least, then this is something Democrats agree on more than Republicans actually, but we asked them if they think Speaker Johnson should solidify or protect himself from potential ousting the way that happened with McCarthy. Do you think that there's a chance Republicans try to strengthen Johnson's gavel?
Well, there was a deal last week between the Main Street Caucus, they call themselves the Pragmatic Caucus, and the Conservative Freedom Caucus, and part of that deal was raising the threshold to trigger a motion to vacate from just 1 member to 9 members. And of course, remember, back in between 2022 and 2023, moving the threshold to bring a motion to vacate was a top, if not the top, request, demand, whatever you want to call it, from hardline Republicans. They ended up getting that because McCarthy needed to agree to that in order to win the gavel. But that was really something that forecast his eventual demise because it just took Matt Gaetz to trigger that vote, and then 7 others joined him. So they struck this deal. There were a lot of hardline Republicans who were upset by some punitive amendments that were put forward by other members of the conference for conference rules that would have penalized members who did various tactics in the Republican conference, vote against rules, vote against speaker nominees. Now, it didn't mention the House Freedom Caucus in that amendment, but those are tactics that are pretty widely used by Freedom Caucus members. So as part of this deal, Main Street Caucus members had agreed to withdraw those amendments, and in exchange, the Freedom Caucus agreed to increase the threshold from 1 to 9.
Gotcha.
So
it's a good old compromise right there.
It's a good old compromise right there. It happened literally just before Republicans huddled to nominate Johnson for Speaker. So that's where things stand right now in terms of protecting Johnson's gavel, the motion to vacate. Look, 9 is better than 1 if you're talking about a mainstream Republican. But let's not forget that there were 8 Republicans who voted to oust McCarthy back in last year.
Yeah.
So we'll have to see if it's enough. I've heard from a number of Republicans who say that isn't enough. But that was a big concession to be made by the hardliners.
Nice. So as we approach this new member event that you guys are doing, do you have any new members that you're keeping a special eye on that you think will be really interesting coming in?
Well, one member who's gotten a lot of sort of media traction already is Sarah McBride, the incoming congresswoman from Delaware, Democrat. She made history in November, becoming the first transgender individual to be elected to Congress. And then we saw this week Congresswoman Nancy Mace introduced legislation that called for banning transgender women from using women facilities in the Capitol, bathrooms, changing rooms, fitness rooms, locker rooms, what have you. This was a reaction to McBride's election, and there were some questions about, well, will this get a vote? Nancy Mace was threatening to force a vote if it was not put into the rules package by the Speaker, and just yesterday the Speaker issued a statement saying that single-sex facilities in the Capitol and House office buildings are just reserved for people of that biological sex, essentially saying transgender women are not allowed to use women restrooms in the Capitol and House office buildings, in addition to locker rooms, changing rooms, so have you. So this, of course, put Sarah McBride, not even a congresswoman yet, not even sworn in the center of the controversy. McBride had issued a few statements saying that, she wasn't going to get pulled into this bathroom fight. She came here to fight for Delaware, her Delaware constituents. She wants to lower costs for them. She issued a statement after Johnson had put out his new policy yesterday saying that as any other member of Congress, I'm going to abide by the rules, even though I don't agree with them. Then getting back to this main theme that, look, she is here to serve the people of Delaware. So she's absolutely going to be a person to keep an eye on, because of this not even brewing anymore, this controversy that really came up to the surface. I'd be curious to see if it continues next year, just in terms of how lawmakers interact with her, and B, what kind of path she charts on Capitol Hill. She made history in a big way, being the first transgender member of Congress. So I'm curious to see how she uses her platform on Capitol Hill and sort of, there's an equality caucus. Does she become involved in that? I would have to assume so.
Yeah.
And other ways that she charts her path.
I think that's super cool to take that statement and just go, I'm going to stay out of this.
Right.
Like that takes a lot of self-control. I think there's a lot of people in politics who could learn from saying, hey, I'm just going to stay above this and like focus on what I came here to do and forget the name calling and all that. So got to respect that. It's funny how quickly you can get elected and you're just thrown into the middle of everything.
Right into the center of the storm.
Yeah. So who you got on the Republican side? Is there anyone you're looking out for?
John McGuire from Virginia. He's the Republican who beat Bob Good in that primary earlier this year. Bob Good, the chairman of the Freedom Caucus, well, now former chairman. I mean, he's sort of as conservative as you could get, right? He was one of those Republicans who voted to oust Kevin McCarthy. He's been one of the most conservative, hardline conservative voices up on Capitol Hill. But John McGuire ran a campaign that was sort of to the right of Bob Good. And that really came down to the fact that John McGuire was endorsed by Trump and Bob Good was not. And that's because at the beginning of the Republican presidential primary, Bob Good endorsed Florida Governor Ron DeSantis over then former President Trump, earning the ire of Trump. And that was sort of the beginning of the end for Bob Good. So I'm interested to see what kind of lawmaker John McGuire is on Capitol Hill. Again, Bob Good was one of the most conservative faces up on Capitol Hill. If there is somebody who is coming out there to be to the right of Bob Good, I'd be interested to see how that plays out. Does he become part of the Freedom Caucus? Does he become part of these rabble-rousers? Could he be a thorn in the side of leadership? All questions I'm wondering to see how he sort of, again, how he charts his path up on Capitol Hill.
It's so funny to see because the political waves had kind of moved away from Trump there before the primary started, where members felt like maybe they could go out and endorse someone else.
Trump doesn't forget.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Trump
He's an elephant. But it really creates some interesting dynamics. And you saw other members like early on go like, I'm just going to back Trump and play the long game and see if he can prevail, which the man is Teflon at this point, I guess. So it's interesting to see how those old kind of rivalries will take hold.
Because Bob could have come back around once, it became clear that Trump was going to be the nominee and endorsed Trump. Like, he completely went into a circle. Bob Good went up to Manhattan to appear, to visit the president, the then former president, at his court hearing in Manhattan. I mean, this was somebody who was really trying to get in the good graces of Trump, but it just wasn't enough to overcome what happened in the primary. And so I'm really curious to see what kind of lawmaker John McGuire will be. Yeah,
that'll be super interesting. Any other out-of-the-box predictions for 2025?
The one thing that I've learned, the biggest lesson I've learned being a reporter, being a journalist, especially a reporter on Capitol Hill, do not make predictions because 9.9 out of 10 times they will be wrong.
For sure.
So I'm going to heed that advice. I think it's going to be exciting. I think we're going to see a lot of Republican on Republican fights and quarrels because of the fact that the House has such a slim majority.
Yeah.
Curious to see if Democrats can again remain united for the majority of these matters. That was something that they had talked about a lot throughout the 118th Congress, that their strength was in their ability to remain united on all these hot button issues. But I have no predictions beyond that. Buckle up, because it will likely be an interesting ride.
Yeah, I'll throw out a prediction because I have like 27 Twitter followers, so you can at me all you want. I really want to see food regulation. Like, that's something I'm excited about. Like, I want to be healthy, and I want that to be easier and not have to read like food ingredients all the time. So, nice. A hopeful David wants to see food regulation.
Put it into the atmosphere.
Yeah. Just putting it out there, and I really don't give a crap because I know nothing about politics at the end of the day. So that's my thing. But outside of politics, is there anything else that you want people to know about who you are?
Follow The Hill, read our reporting, thehill.com. We do great work. We're on top of every single breaking news development you can imagine. We've got great analytical pieces. We've got a fantastic team of reporters who are always on Capitol Hill in the House and Senate. We've also got an army of beat reporters, folks who really zero in on their specific subject expert areas. So we always have a nice mix of the political aspect of a particular fight up on Capitol Hill, but also the policy particulars there too.
For sure. Well, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. It's a lot of fun.
Everyone, make sure you come to the new member.
And come to the new member event.
Yes, that too, So we're excited to have that. It should be a fun one. It's the best graphic I've ever seen for an event.
We've got a great team.
Your graphics team is awesome.
Thank you.
Hey, it's David again. Thank you guys for listening today. We're really excited about this Capital Spotlight podcast and getting it off the ground. So make sure to tune in again. And the easiest way to do that is subscribe to our channels. Check us out on social media at Connect App, CNCT, APP, basically everywhere. So find us there, subscribe to our newsletter, and check out our website, capitalconnect with an O.com. Thanks, guys.